So, I do bring you greetings from Madison. It's about 500,000 people. It's built on 4 lakes. It is the home to a global research university called the University of Wisconsin. And of the 500,000 in our area, 60,000 are students, researchers, faculty of that sort. We file patents at the level of Stanford and MIT. And it has infused the entire culture of the community with a sense of sifting and winnowing, trying to identify the next big issue on the horizon and then craft a solution for it. And that is that culture that infused the agency I started actually 30 years ago, and why we do this annual research that we do that I'm going to tell you about today, the 2017 research. The research that I want to talk with you about today is really this crisis facing content marketers, and it has to do with the fact that we all face a growth imperative. We either grow our brands or they wither and die, generally along with our careers. But today the imperative to grow is stronger than ever. In fact, I would argue that the imperative is actually on warp speed. It's partly because since the Great Recession, there has been slow to no growth. But it's also because growth faster than competitors is now the performance metric faced by most C-suites. Why? Because when you grow faster competitors, or faster, frankly, than even other categories, investments follow you, talent follows you, buzz follows you. So it's no wonder that the CMO Council and Deloitte found in a recent study that while 73% of companies still use growth in revenue as a key metric, now over 50% also use velocity of growth. So it's a big deal. So no wonder the CEOs of Kraft or American Express or others around the world are saying that accelerated growth is something that they are absolutely committed to. They probably have to be to keep their jobs. And historically in an organization, we know that the CMO has been, not by title, but by charge, the Chief Growth Officer. No longer. Most CMOs are struggling to grow, so you see them being switched out and new titles appearing like Chief Growth Officer. And increasingly in the United States, we're seeing the start of a new title, Chief Officer of Accelerating Growth. A very interesting phenomenon. When that shows up at General Mills, you know something's happening. And of course, while growth strategies vary by country or by category, in truth, a universal strategy for driving growth today tends to be content marketing. Of B2B companies, 88% say they engage in it. Of B2C, 76%. And everybody says they plan to create more in the next fiscal year, more content, and market it more. Now, what's interesting is that no less than Accenture has said that content is like water is to life, necessary for health and growth. And you would imagine that with the kind of investment in content marketing and endorsements by folks like Accenture, it must be working. But our research has shown quite the contrary. We have found that content marketing, as practiced by most marketers, is not driving growth, much less accelerating growth, and may actually be inadvertently leading to a stall. This is the first of our conclusions of our study, and the interesting thing is that there are at least 7 causes that we've ascertained, most all of which we can't imagine ever going away. So let's look at the causes. The first is content and content marketing are defined so broadly as to be absolutely meaningless. We did an audit of a lot of the content on content, and these are the words we found referred to as content. You see here a mash of actual content like plays. You see a mashup of actual delivery mechanisms like DVDs, and of course you see formats like Spotify or Pandora. So the interesting thing is content today is so broadly defined as to mean anything and everything. And what happens, because content marketing is similarly broadly defined, that means that you can't wrap a principle about what works. When what it is mushy, what works is mushy. And as a result, we've had a rise of pundits, and I would actually say hucksters, talking about what content marketing is, and mostly they advise people to put out more content. And they say things like this because they make money off of it. Quote, Real site, real promotion. As our own content guru likes to say, with our 11-session online course, you'll be the contentiest of all content marketers in your company. You'll discover how to generate a wealth of ideas so you can continue doing what you're doing. And register now for $5.95. So who's making money off content marketing? Who's growing off content marketing? Folks like this and not marketers. And of course, this kind of promotion of content has really led to the second cause of the crisis, which is what we call content marketing malpractice. You see, when the term content marketing came in the field, it actually was about 2012. And look at the rise of the buzz. So of course, with all the buzz and all this promotion, people are assuming it must be working. We have to do it. And you see a lot of excitement over the years. People saying, do it because it's cheap. Do it because it's so easy to market. You just promote it on LinkedIn or put it on your Facebook page. And of course, a lot of the pundits say, it's easy to make things go viral. Just pay me some money and I'll show you how. Well, the problem is it's led to an explosion of content, and that's the third big cause. An exponential growth in content daily. I could spend days giving you the stats I found from very credible sources. But just for example, think of this. The number of content purveyors we have today that didn't exist 12 or 15 years ago. It is Pandora. It is LinkedIn. It is Alexa. Then, of course, you have your traditional content creators, traditional news organizations, The Guardian, New York Times, TV networks, and they are not just putting out more content, but on more platforms, which essentially means more content. And then, of course, you have relatively new companies like Netflix and Amazon and Apple now getting into actually spending billions a year on original content. And then, of course, we have new organizations like the merger of AOL and Verizon and Yahoo. Imagine the data they have on users that they are now going to use to promote their original content. And then, of course, you have brands putting out content and algorithmically generated content. It's really quite remarkable. And the rationalization for all of this is, of course, the assumption that traditional media is fading and thus less effective. That's the presumption. And, of course, thus, the rationalization for the perception of traditional media fading in its effectiveness is, well, more content must be the answer. Because, of course, people are looking for content 24/7. So more content is going to grow our brands. But it does not add up. It's quite interesting because we're starting to see some folks really making this point. Some of you may be familiar with the Progressive Insurance brand in the United States. It's a leader. And Jeff Charney, their CMO, recently said, everyone's so concerned about ad blocking and time shifting, but we see a very different threat. Everybody is flooding the web with their own content, hour by hour, minute by minute. Quote, marketers' content is not just competing with top competitors or even other brands outside of our category. We're competing with people's friends, mothers, and self-made celebrities on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and it's just getting started. Everyone who has one of these has their own content studio. There are 2.3 billion of these in the world. Every brand is putting out content. In the United States, there are an estimated 5,680,000 brands. And though I am several thousand miles from home, thanks to this device, I can get content from my home's security system. In other words, due to the Internet of Things, everything that is connected via the Internet of Things is putting off content of a sort. And it is estimated that there are 50 billion appliances and items giving off data thanks to the Internet of Things. We see this kind of stuff all the time, stunning data, how much is put out every minute, everywhere. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of the stunning stuff that's out there, the level of content being produced. But I think perhaps the most stunning stat is this. Output per brand, per channel per year of content is up 35%. Content engagement per channel per year is down 17%. People are engaging less. There's just too much. And it makes tons of sense because there's no more time in the day to consume more content. The expectation is, I'm putting out more content, I'll be able to engage more with it, but the realism is there's no more time in the day for any of us. we still have to take a shower. I can listen to the TV in the background when I am cooking, but I can't listen to the TV and the radio and be reading stuff online. There is a finite amount of time we have to do content, and what's more, if you want me to use your content, you have to switch me off of something else I'm already using. So the interesting point is that content providers are starting to also face this as a big hurdle. As the CEO of Netflix just said a couple of weeks ago, our content is competing with sleep. Not a good position to be in. And of course, if marketers are having trouble engaging people with their content, that's a big problem. It is harder and harder to engage people, and that is a real crisis. Interestingly enough, the popular strategies to deal with this are actually making things worse. How many of you are getting pings and alerts when you get a text message or when you are shopping at the grocery store because someone's using geolocating? That is an effort to try and engage you with more content, and a lot of folks are turning it off because it is actually irritating to them. What's more, when you look at the strategies that do work, increasingly my agency is doing precision targeting and precision marketing because it works. But when everybody is doing it, it means we're all going to be walking into Tesco, and Tesco is going to be pinging us, as well as half of the brands in Tesco, and it's going to turn off consumers even more. So this is part of the crisis. Popular strategies to increase engagement are only going to make the crisis worse. And what is more, it's not just well-meaning marketers knowing these techniques of precision marketing and data mining and modeling. It is nefarious types. And the last cause we'll highlight today of the crisis is the increase in fake, boring, threatening, harassing, violent, depressing, dangerous content using the same good techniques that we marketers are earnestly using. We are all being trained to look at emails more carefully. Be wary of clicking on links because we could lose our privacy, we could lose our bank account. It is a dangerous time, and people are being more wary of content. You see this in the proverbial canaries in the coal mine. They are increasing. Study after study is showing people are shying away from content. We see the Pew Research Center alerting us of people's fear of narcissism, their kids being more narcissistic, being judged by what they put on Facebook and whether it gets liked or not. We see Mark Andreessen, the famous venture capitalist, swearing off Twitter because he said it was taking over his life. You see Associated Press polls, American Psychological Association talking about the effect this is having on teens, and they're even realizing it. And most notably, you see a great study by Horizon Media noting a dramatic uptick in consumers disconnecting from their digital devices and a quest for more authentic connections with others, more privacy, and a sense of personal identity, which they feel they've lost because they're always being sucked into the content around them. Now, another canary in the coal mine is one we are probably all experiencing personally. It is that CMOs we work for are worried. They have known of content marketing since 2011, 2012. They have invested a lot in it, including their reputations, and they aren't seeing a return. They're starting to get quite nervous. And they would expect after 5 or 6 years of doing this, they would start to see some kind of a measurable return. But The Economist reports that the pressure is on now to prove content marketing works, as only 30% of B2B marketers believe their content marketing is effective, down 8 percentage points from just a year before. So this is why our study's first conclusion is the crisis of content marketing efficacy is quite real. It is driving some to drink, proverbially. But you will also appreciate that given the crisis already, there is not a lot of optimism that's going to go away with a lot of folks putting out more and more content. But you will laugh, I promise you, at our second conclusion. It is that content is not going to go away. We will continue to do promotional, informative, entertaining, functional, navigational, service-oriented, communal, and familial content of all kinds. Because after all, ladies and gentlemen, when your child is being eaten by a camel, do you save your child or do you take a photo and post it on Facebook? We all know what we would do. So in service to our clients, just as you would when you see a crisis, in service to your clients, you would say, my God, we've got to figure out what to do about this. And so we did a second study, and you'll recognize many of the sources we used for our deep dive. We worship essentially at Ehrenberg Bass and the IPA and what Les and Peter do, and we look at cases and we do extensive studies ourselves to try and figure out what is working for those folks who are finding success with content marketing. And the third conclusion of our study I want to tell you about today is, yes, some things are actually working to mitigate the crisis and accelerating growth. In fact, we have 7 recommendations for you today, and I'm going to go through them very briefly because, like all studies, like Les and Peter's, there are far more findings than one can put into some 30 minutes. But the first finding I don't think will entirely surprise you, but I will tell you it raises hackles in the United States when I make this presentation. And it is essentially, don't put all your eggs in the basket of content marketing. There are actually a lot of other strategies proven to accelerate growth. So please put them in your mix. We know what those strategies are. They are the things preached by Ehrenberg Bass and the IPA. They are things like use mass media advertising and mass media PR. I will save you the details I have to explain to the United States office, United States folks, even though the sources include the IPA and Nielsen. But traditional media is not dead. It can still be quite effective. And even Nielsen points out that brands actively engaged in mass media outreach see more impact on hard business results at all stages of the purchase funnel than brands relying primarily on content marketing. And of course, we all know why. It is the function of broad reach that mass media advertising and publicity bring to the mix. Our friends at the ARF have been preaching this for some time. They say that TV advertising, mass media advertising is great for jump-starting engagement, and digital and social is great for keeping it alive. But it's very slow to scale reach with digital and social only, and much less it's very hard to do brand building. So of course, we need to think of broad reach when doing content marketing, but in addition, add to the mix broad reach strategies such as traditional advertising and PR. Because as we all know here, having been devotees of Les and Peter, the IPA, and Ehrenberg Bass, we have to target broadly. We have to target not just current customers, but occasional users. And in fact, we have to start exposing our brand to those not even in the current market for what we're offering. We have to start exposing people 3 years ahead of time before they're in the category, because that's how long it takes to build those long-term memory structures. Curiously enough, a lot of folks doing content marketing are really thinking activation in their mind, precision marketing, and they are targeting very narrowly. They are thinking current users and lookalikes. They are not doing brand building, and they are not really going to grow very quickly in the way that they are marketing their content. You see this return to mass media expressed in the practices of wildly successful companies like B2B companies in the US like Deloitte, and then of course Coke and P&G returning to mass media in their mix to the point of not putting all their eggs in one basket. As P&G's Mark Pritchard said last spring at the ANA Masters of Marketing Content, we were producing massive amounts of unfocused branded content, often to laughable results. We fell into a content crap trap. In our quest to do dynamic, real-time marketing in the digital age, we were producing thousands of new ads, posts, and tweets because we thought the best way to cut through the clutter was to create more clutter. He says, we targeted too much digitally and socially, and we went too narrow. So now we're looking at the best way to get the most reach. That means an increase in our TV budget and a focus on digital ads that reach larger audiences. Facebook won't be getting any less from us, but from experience we find TV is still one of the best platforms for reaching a large and engaged audience. So the first recommendation, have a mix of strategies beyond content, especially those proven to drive growth and accelerate it. And our second recommendation is ban from your use terms like content and content marketing. They are so broadly defined as to be confusing and imprecise in suggesting what should be done. What's more, when you compare definitions of content marketing to the exact words used to define marketing communications 10 years ago, you find that the same definitions, they just took out the word marketing communications and inserted the word content. Now, marketing communications, I like the word marketing. It suggests you're actually moving things along a funnel. So I would suggest we take out the word content or content marketing, return to marketing communications, and better yet, content marketing outputs that drives outputs. So move from this to this, the outcomes. Move from this and from outputs, which is pretty what content and content marketing is all about, to marketing, communication, outcomes. We know that a best practice in life and business is to begin with the end in mind. And when you start with the marketing communication outcome, the outcome you want from what you're doing, you will have a better brief up front and better results. Now, the interesting thing about outcomes is when we think about what we have to create creatively along the funnel, in terms of outcome, we get more specific. What kind of outcome do we want at the top of the funnel or the middle? What progresses people along? What is the outcome of this piece of communications? Is it penetration, for example? It really changes the dynamic of what you create, obviously. And that brings me to my next point, one of the many ahas I got from Peter, and that is ROI, which is really what a lot of CMOs are looking for from their content marketing, is really an efficiency outcome. And we really, while efficiency is great, wouldn't we much rather have an effectiveness outcome? So year-over-year increases in sales share, margin, and brand strength are really the ideal outcomes that we should be thinking about as we begin our brief and our team to come up with materials. But I'm here to tell you today that in a world where accelerating growth is top of mind for every C-suite and velocity is the new metric, we need to actually think of a new metric, which is growth faster than others, an acceleration outcome. And if you think about that at the beginning of your brief, then the kind of content you create and the mix you use to promote it is going to be much different. And you'll get farther along in your success in the world today where velocity is so important. And if velocity is important, there's nothing that moves faster in the world today than a conversation. So our third recommendation is own signature conversations. These are the kinds of things that break through the clutter, because in conversations that catch on, people are spreading them because they see in them who they are or aspire to be. We advocate, we communicate those things which are hyper-relevant to us and that fit today's version of survival of the fittest, our self-concept and our aspirations. Now, hyper-relevance, of course, is what is needed in a world where push is dead and pull is everything. And some interesting research is starting to surface on the pulling power of questions. It turns out that blog posts ending in a question generate 162% more interactions than those that do not. And tweets that end with a question have 50% more engagement. So I invite you to think about not just owning a signature conversation, but instigating it and fueling it with questions. And there's no better example of this than the quintessential question women ask from the time they are 3 or 4 or 5 years old of themselves. Again, it speaks to who we, as females, see ourselves as or aspire to be. And it is this question: what is real beauty? When Dove launched this campaign 13, 14 years ago, they did not realize, I think, the power of asking the quintessential question of the category. And essentially, women all over the world and of all ages have so glommed onto this conversation, it has sustained the brand, built Dove beyond their wildest dreams. When you look at the outcomes from this question that started a conversation, what is real beauty, you see in the second year sales are up 13% year over year, 25% year over year globally, and in the first 10 years, and it's hard to find this data, ladies and gentlemen, because they don't put it out, but in the first 10 years, they grew from a $2.5 billion brand to a $4 billion brand. Not a bad outcome from having the right conversation fueled by continually asking, in its various forms, the same question, having the same conversation regardless of medium, regardless of type of content. What is real beauty? The truth of the matter is, whether we are individuals or brands, we are the sum total of all the conversations held about us every day. So it's very important today to understand that psychologically speaking, we are hardwired to seek out conversations. They were the first search engine. We have a subconscious desire to seek out, through questions, who we are and what we aspire to be. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, it is not content that people are after, it is conversations. We are hardwired for conversations, hardwired to respond to questions. And in fact, economists will tell you that markets are in fact conversations. So if you want to be part of the world of commerce today, you have to insert yourself into those conversations. And here's how one B2B company did it beautifully. It's one of the world's largest global asset managers, and they're called State Street Global. And their question: why aren't more women on boards in C-suite positions? How many are familiar with Fearless Girl? Most all of you. It was a magnificent move, and it was a very seminal question in the world of investment today, especially in the U.S. We had folks buzzing about our office. I see women over the U.S. now taking the pose of Fearless Girl. And of course, it created many other questions that were on brand for their initiative. Who put that statue on Wall Street? What does it mean? Does she belong there permanently across from the classic bull of Wall Street? What can I do to make a difference? The outcomes of this question and the conversations that ensued in the first 60 days included a 384% increase in she-funded trading volume. Those are their funds that are invested in companies with an inordinate number of women in the C-suite. An 8% increase in funds invested, and a 15-fold increase in inbound calls from institutional investors. So the question for all of you as you go back to your agencies or your clients or your companies is, what is your signature conversation, and what question should trigger it? This will be important because in marketing today, you then will be charged with dimensionalizing it. Our fourth recommendation: dimensionalize conversations to your growth ambitions. If you want to grow faster, you have to have more dimensions to your conversation. Now, we all know a one-dimensional conversation is like websites 10, 15 years ago. One way, not interactive, brochureware. We all know two-dimensional conversations are most websites and blog posts today. A little interactivity, you post something, you might get a lot of posts or a little back and forth. But increasingly, we all have to move to 3D and 4D conversations. You saw a sampling of one yesterday if you were at the event down in Code Node. It was one staged by Guinness, where with virtual reality and aromas, there was a three-dimensional conversation. A conversation we have with ourselves, with our senses, the smell, the aroma, the sounds of Guinness. One of my favorites, because it generated a lot of revenue, was done by a Chicago restaurant recently. It was 3D because you not only wore virtual reality glasses to tour the Macallan distillery, you were exposed to the ability to feel peat in front of you and smell it, all while sampling the scotch. So it was very sensual. And of course, they charge $95 a person. The right kind of 3D experiences people will pay money for, which means your conversations and your content can generate revenue. We know the most successful four-dimensional conversationalist is Disney. They operate in a world without dimension, without any limitation to the space-time continuum. They are the optimum omni-marketer, omni-content provider. And any of you that have been to one of their properties like Disney World or are fans of their content know that they are the ones to beat in 4D, and really we should all be studying what they're doing because they have the same conversations regardless of platform. It is literally virtual reality in the ultimate sense. And the fact that if you're in 3 and 4D, you can charge money for your conversations is an important point, because our fifth recommendation is we should treat content as the product we're creating, launching, scaling to sell for profit, because our products and services are really just the souvenirs and the mementos of that content. Said a better way, we should be treating our conversations as the product we're launching, scaling, and selling for a product. For profit, because again, the products and services then are the mementos of that conversation. If this seems like a weird concept for you, to create conversations so valuable, so relevant that people will pay for them, consider what Mondelez announced at Cannes in 2016. They have promised that by 2020, they will be producing content that consumers will actually pay to watch. And of course, for those of us who have been studying this, it's not surprising to see all kinds of companies that are producing content and conversations that they are asking people to pay for to have access to. I could give you case after case with all of these. Some charge 10 cents a month for access to be part of the conversation. And again, Disney, if you want to join their fan club, you're paying $104 a month. The ability to charge for the right kind of dimensionalized conversations and content is really something quite significant for us all to think about. What's important here with this recommendation is that when you treat your content and your conversation as something you are charging for, you shift how you think about what you're doing. You think, oh my God, it has to be hyper-relevant. I have to platform it. So every subsequent conversation is like doves. It is the same conversation regardless of the medium. You have to look for apertures in the customer's journey to find a way to sell your content and scale it differently, which a lot of content marketers are not. And of course, you have to think about how am I going to seriously launch the content, how am I going to get people to switch from other content they're spending on during the day to mine, and how do I habituate them to my content. If you want folks to study, look at the professional content marketers, such as National Geographic. How do they launch their content? In the way most none of us have ever launched the content we do for our brands and our clients. They put a full court press, a full launch plan with a mix of strategies. And if you're looking for a wonderful case of someone who has done a great launch and worked to habituate people to their content while switching people off of others, study what Amazon has done with the launch of Echo. You see engaging with questions, emails, what's new with Alexa. You see habituation strategies, things to try. Alexa, ask Alexa, what's the eclipse? Ask Alexa, how many days till Labor Day? I don't know about you, but I get emails every week from Alexa, keeping up the habituation and trying to switch me off of other conversations back to Alexa's, like running out of toilet paper. Alexa can order it from you from Amazon. So really quite interesting stuff. So when you think about or question the need to take the mindset of charging for your content and conversation, understand the whys, why we recommend it. First of all, it will drive you to have more hyper-relevant content, which will make you more engaging. It will increase the usage of your content because you will think about, I have to scale it. And scaling engagement is really what we have to do today. And I will launch it more professionally. It will force you to get some revenue to cover the great expenses of doing content marketing. It's terribly expensive. And if you can get some revenue from it, you'll have a better ROI. But here is the kicker. You have to think about and adopt a mindset of selling conversations, making conversations so wonderful people will pay for them. Because until you do, you will not have direct access to the customer. Your direct access to the customer will be disintermediated by Amazon, by Oath, by others who have access, and you will have to work through them. They will have the customer data. You won't. If you are engaging with a customer, you will have transactional data. You will have the greater ability to compete against the mega brands like Amazon and others. And what's more, you will have data that you need to survive in the future with machine learning and with AI. So you have to think about charging for conversations, creating content and conversations so wonderful people will pay to engage in them with you. And when it comes time to marketing them and doing real content marketing, the key is, of course, to use marketing strategies proven to drive growth. We know what they are. We studied Ehrenberg Bass. We studied the IPA stuff. I will not repeat to you all the learning, but it is there. Use what works. But perhaps the last recommendation we have is the first one you have to start with. Because when you're going to do this, you know you have to go upstairs to the C-suite and say, you know, I need some money for TV. Or, you know, those short-term metrics you're using to judge me on, I need you to understand there's a long-term view here that we have to take. And taking those conversations upstairs, up to the big boys, is frightening to some. So we actually have to, as our fourth recommendation, excel in the marketing of marketing upstairs in our organizations. I've come to appreciate the last few years that we have all, as practitioners, worked very hard to excel at marketing to our customers, but that's only half of our job. The other half is we have to excel at marketing up, because if we know what works, we will never be able to do it unless the folks upstairs get it, buy in, fund it, invest in it, support us in it. CMOs will continue to have short turnover, short lives in a job, unless the folks upstairs understand it takes at least 3 years, over 2 years, to see the manifestation of real brand strength. So that is our seventh recommendation about how to really tackle and mitigate the crisis and still drive growth. And I want to end with one thing we still haven't quite figured out. It's still unclear when and how the crisis will end. Thought a lot about this, and yet I see on the horizon some inklings that either the crisis will end in 4 or 5 years or it will start to morph dramatically. How many of you know who Elon Musk is? A lot of folks thought he was nuts when he launched SpaceX or Tesla, and yet he has defied the odds and been phenomenally successful by thinking big. Well, many of you may know that he launched less than a year ago a company called Neuralink to develop direct cortical interface. Direct cortical interface. Essentially, the idea is directly putting into the brain a connection to a computer. The company is Neuralink. He says they'll have their first products available in 2021. That's 4 years from now. Now, the truth of the matter is direct cortical interface is not exactly new. Over 100,000 Parkinson sufferers have a chip in their brain to address their jitters. And increasingly, we see folks having chips and cortical interfaces to help them use artificial limbs. But the Wall Street Journal just a few months ago reported that one of the biggest investors in direct cortical interface is the U.S. Defense Department. They've been doing it for some time, quote, with the ambition of developing a fully functional brain-computer interface that can turn a person into a programmable, debugged machine just like a computer. So, ladies and gentlemen, where the crisis of content marketing is going to end, I don't know. But I respectfully suggest to you that 3 or 4 years from now, as opposed to marketing conversations and content, we might be marketing for folks to directly download our content right into their brains. Stay tuned.
I was following you kind of up till very near the very end when you started talking about selling content and getting into that world where marketers are going to start competing with Netflix and Disney and all of those guys, which felt to me, I thought you were contradicting what you said earlier about that's really, really hard to do. Mm-hmm. The Mark Pritchard type quote. So am I misunderstanding? Because that's where I'm tripping up in what you said.
So let me repeat your question to see if I understand it. You are not sure what I mean by creating conversations that people will pay for?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that going to be really, really hard to do? And isn't that what Mark Pritchard and people have been trying to do and saying is the wrong strategy?
I can't speak to whether Mark Pritchard has been saying it's the wrong strategy. I can tell you that from what I have seen, that the only way we are going to survive is to think that way, whether or not we actually act on it. By thinking that we have to create something worthy, so worthy that people will pay for it, gives us a discipline of having hyper-relevant conversations and launching them as if we were launching a new product, and thinking about switching strategies and habituation strategies. So it is more the discipline of thinking that way. That said, the beauty of it, if you can do it, and I agree it's going to be very hard, is you then get the absolutely critical direct contact with a customer and the data you need to compete. I worry a great deal that if we are not directly engaged with our customers and they with us in something transactional, we are not going to have the data to compete against others who are bigger, wealthier content creators than we are. Who among us has the millions to put against content creation that Netflix has, and or Amazon, and others, and Oath, which is, of course, the result of AOL and Verizon and Yahoo merger. I think we have to think very seriously about how to do it.
Thank you.
One more question? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great. For those of you who maybe didn't hear the question is the industry has long valued stories and said we have to be excellent storytellers. Content from time immemorial has been comprised of stories. They're getting shorter, they're getting longer, they're getting more intuitive. So storytelling is a thread that, of course, is great content. The question is, how do you create stories about that's jumpstart conversations, or what is the question inherent in the story? We all know the hero's journey could be, I suppose, phrased as a question: will he or she make it? So against the odds. So I would invite you to think about what stories do questions answer? What are the universal questions that classic stories answer? And perhaps rethink stories in terms of questions and conversations that they jumpstart.
Thank you, Marsha.
Pleasure. Thanks to all of you.